Thank you for joining us today with this presentation. This is going to be fast-paced. I got 30 minutes. It's a good thing it's going to be recorded so you can go back over this. So my research is based on if good ethics is good business, then what's the problem? Every company will say, yeah, we have good ethics. We got a great mission statement, et cetera. Well, so did Wells Fargo and God knows how many others during every week that have, in the pharmaceutical industry, we have issues. I mean, all kinds of things. If it's so good, what's the problem? So I've identified 5 problematic areas that need to be addressed in ethics training and in leadership training. Number 1, compliance is not the same as ethics. One of my big battle cries in my work is when I see a title called the Ethics and Compliance Officer. Wait a minute, you can't be an expert in both. And the chances are compliance is getting the vast majority of time and investment in training, and maybe rightly so. I mean, compliance is very important, but so is ethics. And so we cannot equate the same. You can keep the law and still be unethical. Case in point. Number 2, the lack of moral awareness in decision-making. And I'm going to cover that obviously in some greater detail as we go through this. Number 3, shades of gray in ethical thinking. How often have we said, well, it depends? Well, it depends on what? What's the thought process? Well, how do we go from here to there? What are the values that we have to espouse or are supposed to? And at what price to pay? Will we challenge them or cheapen them? Whatever. Number 4, the death of bland training. When you just leave it at knowledge, you got nothing. You can go online and get knowledge. This type of training really needs to focus on wisdom. We'll talk a little bit about that. And number 5, the leadership quagmire. What is it about leadership that is causing some issues regarding decision-making and empowerment of those levels of management, maybe above and below them? So let's get started. Number 1, compliance is not ethics. Compliance is letter of the law. Ethics is spirit of the law, uniquely different. Compliance is playing by enforceable rules. Ethics is obedience to the unenforceable. I've never heard of anybody going on trial for ethics. They go on trial for compliance issues, but not ethics. Even the term compliance means it's reactive. You don't have a choice because the law comes down from on high, and then you need to do that. It's not right or wrong, it just is, and we need to do that. Ethics is proactive. It must be chosen. It's a choice, and there's different skill sets. They're relatable, but they're not the same. 2 types of ethics, according to Marvin Brown, wrote a great book called Working Ethics. Negative ethics tells us what not to do, prevents a harm, and it implies the obligation not to do harm. A lot of employee handbooks are like this. When you see things like no employee shall, no employee shall, no employee, you're talking about negative ethics. And for the creative person who now knows what not to do, the presumption is everything else must be okay. And then when they get caught, they say, well, it wasn't in the handbook. So if you really want to focus on negative ethics as the primary, you're going to need a handbook, 400,000 pages, that's going to cover every possible violation that you can think of. The other issue is this makes management and leadership more like cops, judges, and juries finding what people are doing wrong, what not to do. And that saps their energy and your energy from doing your job as well. The goal is positive ethics. Gives us guidelines for what we should do, promotes a good, implies the responsibility to do good, and relies on the power of the organization to be responsive and to love the ability to respond. This might be stated, all employees who know the needs of their internal and external customers so we can deliver the products and services they deserve. Positively stated, promotes a good. Therefore now, with positive ethics, the leader is a coach, a cheerleader, rather than judge and jury. Much better position for leadership. The guidelines, particularly with guidelines, now who is responsible for the decision? The individual. It's their choice. Now, and it puts it in a much more favorable, positive way of encouraging people to make the right decision. Ethics focuses on action, not behavior. Once it's done, once the behavior is over, then it's unethical or illegal or whatever. Ethics is only proactive. All employees shall. See, that's projection, that's action. And it justifies action, not behavior, because it could be your value statement. It could be the mission statement of your organization. It justifies the action. If you have values of integrity and honesty and etc., actions must follow those. That's the process of embedding those values into the individual employee. And we need to acknowledge the gap between what ought and what is. Another way of putting this, there is an ethics gap. And the ethics gap is this: what I personally know is right from wrong and what I think it takes to be successful. And in some companies, which we hear about on the news, the gap is very big. But will there always be a gap? Absolutely. What's the goal? Make the gap as small as possible. But there will always be a gap. Values will always be challenged. There'll never be a complete sync between an organization and an individual. But the closer the gap is, the better it is. And those are the companies where they have low turnover rate, people want to be employed there, customers or clients or patients, whatever the industry is, are happy because of the service they're getting. That's what we need to focus on, keeping that gap as small as possible. Number two, the lack of moral awareness. If you've not heard of Rushworth Kidder, he started the Institute of Global Ethics. Phenomenal writer. He wrote books like Shared Values in a Troubled World, Moral Courage, The Ethics Recession. This is from his book, Moral Courage. He says there are only 4 dilemmas for humanity. Any dilemma that you find in the workplace has to be one of these 4. And in identifying it, it gives you a leg up on how to deal with it. So here's his 4 dilemmas of humanity: truth versus loyalty, individual versus community, short-term versus long-term, justice versus mercy. So let's quickly go through these, but let's use parenting as an example. Those of us that have kids, how many times have we said, if you tell us the truth, you won't be punished? Then we tell them the truth, and what do? We punish them. Now they have a choice. I tell you the truth or be loyal to my friends. Individual versus community. I got this from my father. But Dad, everybody's going to the party tonight. He would say, not everybody, you're not. Individual versus community. Short-term versus long-term. Are you sure you want to spend your allowance on this candy here? I thought you were saving it for our vacation. Short-term versus long-term. Justice versus mercy. And when do we meet out as a parent? Punishment. Or when are we merciful? And how do we decide when and where? This is true in the workplace. Okay, the key thing for a leader to find out, manager, etc., is the issue a truth versus loyalty? Is the issue an individual versus community? Is the issue a short-term goal versus the long-term goal? Or is it justice versus mercy? Excuse me. Once you're able to identify, you're on your way to getting some insights into how to deal with it. To be morally aware, let me just grab a sip here of water. To be morally aware, one must commit to moral principles. Number 2, develop a sensitivity and the realization that there is risk in living out those principles. And have a resolve to, if needed, to pay the price. There is always what I call the Ptp factor. What is your price to pay for what you want to do? And if you can't pay, you better walk away. But if you believe in those moral principles, that's your line in the sand, so to speak. One of my clients, I asked them, give me an example of lack of moral awareness. And this is from a VP of an energy company, a VP of compliance. Here's what she said. When one is in touch with one's innate sense of morality and can feel the moral components of events, someone who does not have moral awareness does not notice the moral clues provided to him or her by one's psyche, the same way that someone who does not listen to his or her body may miss the signs of cancer or disease until they're very pronounced. I thought that was pretty powerful. You know in conscience or intuition when something's not right. Something, is ajar there. It's kind of like listening to your body. And aren't we in the preventive maintenance mode of healthcare today? Catch cancer early, et cetera, because you listen to your body. Same thing with that moral awareness dimension. So we need to set the tone that is positive, inclusive, and empowering. You need to model the behavior you want others to embrace. Remember this as leaders. People listen with their eyes, not with their ears. They're not into too much of what you say. They're very much into what you do. Number 3, be the change you want others to embrace. Number 4, live the values you preach, promote, and then expect others to do the same. And only then, when you complete number 4, live the values you preach, promote them, and then expect others to do the same. Shades of gray ethical thinking. Let's think about this from an ethical perspective. Is anything in life absolutely right or wrong, this or that, etc.? The key word is absolutely, and that gives people, some movement in decision making. These are the 2 key ethics issues I see today in the workplace. One is, it's not so matter what's right versus wrong anymore, because that's pretty clear. One of the issues is, what do you do when it's right versus right? What do you do as a leader when 2 values you believe in are in conflict with each other? That's what I call the process of thinking ethically. The other issue that we have now that I see an awful lot is we now have 5 generations in the workplace at the same time. Boomers, Xers, Ys, Millennials, and now Generation Z, those born since 1996. And research has pointed out that generation, the 2 things they want most when they go to work is respect and ethical behavior. Generation Z. When you have 5 generations in the workplace, you've got 5 different definitions of ethics. Now what do you do? And how do we get them all on the same page? So what training does one need to deal with these 2 issues in particular? One needs to be a moral agent, that is, one who considers alternative courses of action and can justify one's choices with good reasons. So this is, ethics is a tough decision with the payout at the end. This is what makes it a tough decision. You cannot make an ethical decision, in my opinion, based on emotions. You must consider alternative courses of action. Because knowing yourself is a question of values. In business as in life, you cannot substitute rules for values. You have to know yourself and what your values are. And you cannot substitute rules. So we need to kind of go slow, think well, and I think even agonize, and I mean that in a positive sense, over a decision, to think this stuff through and then be able to justify with good reasons. We need to ask ourselves, so what does it mean to you to be ethical? Is it the golden rule? Is it being transparent? Is it honesty? What does that mean to yourself? And then what guides you ethically? Is it how you were raised? And that can go pro or con. Is it the law? Is it a code of conduct? A code of conduct in a business is different than a code of ethics, by the way. Conduct just deals with behavior. Code of ethics deals with values that support good behavior. Excuse me. So questions for your reflection. Have you made it a priority to help your people think ethically about that work. And research shows that the weakest link in the leadership chain is the mid-level management, because they are a company's first line of ethical defense. Where are employees going to go to? They're going to go to the mid-level manager. But research has pointed out they are the least trained in ethics. Another study I came across this week said 70% of mid-level managers are afraid to talk to their employees. The article used the word scared. So we got some issues here. If you made it a priority, focus on that mid-level management as well in their ethics training and expand their training and give them the tools by which to defuse emotions in order to get to an ethical decision of whatever the process is that someone is working on or complaining about. Number two, how well are you training your people in the process of thinking ethically? And how ongoing is it? One-shot deals don't work in training. You know, any training must be ongoing. Compliance is ongoing. Why not ethics? Rather than just sign when someone is hired on the, employee handbook that yes, I will be ethical, and maybe nothing happens after that for as long as they're there. That's why good ethics is good business. It should be good business. Kind of falls through the cracks. Number three, ethical thinking just doesn't happen. People need to be coached through it. Using examples, case studies, personal examples, the four dilemmas, etc., of the process of thinking things through, knowing that either way, there will be a price to pay for one's decision. Another sip, excuse me. So we need to think generations, not quarters. Remember, 5 generations in the workplace. Ethical awareness needs to be a top priority in training. We need to honor people's differences, particularly levels of management, their job, their education, etc. Respect people, but you can disagree with behavior. This is why we have all these sexual harassment issues, don't we, out in the world? It's a power play of disrespecting people. And then the behaviors that follow. You and I have a right to disagree with someone's behavior. You and I do not have the right to go after someone's self-esteem. There's a difference between telling someone, why did you do this? That you are the dumbest thing next to the jackass, or normally you don't make these poor decisions. I wonder why you did it here. You see the difference? When you respect people, disagree with behavior, and make sure they understand it's the behavior and not them at that point. Focus not on the terms right or wrong, because those can be very subjective, but focus on terms like what's negotiable, what's not negotiable in this department, what is acceptable, what is not acceptable, and walk them through it. Have a discussion about this. Because what you want are people's affirmation that, yeah, that makes sense. We can operate that department that way. Cool. Then you as the manager or leader, whatever, then it's easy to point out, I thought we agreed that's not acceptable behavior. Could you explain to me why that happened here on your watch? So what's negotiable, what's not? What's acceptable, what's not? Has to be meted out in a department, in a division, in a company, whatever, and which becomes part of a mission statement, by the way, and value statement. So right and wrong, very subjective. Use what's negotiable, what's not, what's acceptable, what's not, to keep people on track. Number 4, the death of bland training. So what's the goal of your compliance and ethics training? Is it new skills? Is it to change behavior? Anything else is just awareness, i.e. knowledge transfer. Any training without ongoing reinforcement and follow-up is worthless. Worthless. Sometimes a lot of training falls into those categories. It has to be. When I talk to clients, I say, fine, what's going to happen after I leave? What are you going to do next month as reinforcement? Are you going to take, one of my slides and use it as a discussion guide, or et cetera? Because if people perceive this as a one-shot deal, it's going to change their attitude about why they should learn it at all. So any training without ongoing reinforcement and follow-up is worthless. Effective training should provide behaviors, skills, so that people can use them immediately. So a process of thinking would be, so what is to be done? Why does it need to be done? And how should we do it? And why? That'll slow down emotions getting out of control. That'll focus on the issue and get them into a different mode of thinking. Remember, training is a process, not a one-shot event. You set people up to fail if you approach training with the attitude, let's get them all in the room and tell them what they need to know. What makes you think they're going to remember it? Once that hour is over, or 2 hours, or whatever the case might be. If it's not applicable, if it doesn't make sense, if they can't use the material, and then they don't have a chance to reevaluate it, that would be part of the ongoing process. How valuable is it? Sometimes we need to take a temperature check on our training initiatives and see the enthusiasm or lack thereof. I think we need to focus on wisdom versus knowledge. We can get knowledge anywhere. Go online, read a book, etc. But wisdom, leaders must be wisdom merchants, so to speak. You've got the knowledge. How do we break it down into wisdom? And wisdom only happens eyeball to eyeball. Greatest example I can give you, the best teacher you ever had. Think for a minute now. Face, name, subject, grade. Okay? Did that teacher not share wisdom? Did that teacher not raise the bar for goals? Did that teacher not take time for you? Wasn't discipline fair and just? Best teacher. If you go just for knowledge, that would probably want your worst teacher. They taught the book, not you. Had favorites. Discipline was chaotic, etc. Think of your best teacher and all that best teacher's attributes. In fact, take a sheet of paper sometime, divide it down the middle, lengthwise, write best and worst on the other side. List all the teachers, all the characteristics of your best teacher on one side, all the characteristics of your worst teacher on the other side. And every day before you go to work, decide which one you want to be remembered for. You remembered them, didn't you? And so will your people. Always focus on the best teacher. That was the wisdom that you learned. You've got your best grades there. The mediocre or worst teachers just gave you knowledge without any personal involvement, hardly at all, in your education experience. Number 5 is the leadership quagmire. You got to decide, are you leading or are you managing? I think, how many times I've run into this quote, you manage tasks, you lead people. Manage tasks, lead people. And we all deal with change, but with change, you got to anticipate, adapt, and act. Anticipate, adapt, and act. The economy is changing, everything is changing. The family life is changing. So, and which one is the key? The key is, how will we adapt? How, when, and why, and what if? To being able to adapt is key. That doesn't mean at the expense of values or ethics or compliance. It's just that, how do we apply it differently? Therefore, I don't believe in situational ethics. That denotes to me the situation will dictate my ethics. I believe that when we come into different situations, we stand by ethics and how is ethics applied in that situation. And that may be different, but you're coming from the same foundation. No such thing as situational ethics. How we adapt, how do we apply our ethics training, what we believe about ethics, to different situations. It doesn't cheapen it, doesn't make it any less important. It's how we apply it that is key. So ethical competence then equals what? One-shot ethics training, ongoing, department meetings, going over the values of an organization in depth, however we gauge it. That's what we're working for, is ethical competence. Another thing we need to look at, how old is your mission statement? If your mission statement is over 3 years old, your company, your organization needs to revisit it. I'm working with a pharmaceutical company now. I got on their website. I couldn't even find their mission statement. When I talked to the VP of compliance of this pretty large pharmaceutical company, they said, well, we're working on it. I said, working on it? I said, people are going to your website. They want to know what you stand for. They said, yeah, I know, we're a little behind the 8 ball. I guess. A mission statement should only be 1 to 2 short paragraphs. You should be able to recite it. And they should answer these 3 questions. What's your business? Who are your customers? And what do you do differently than your nearest competitor? And guess which one most companies choke on? Number 3. If you can't tell me what you do differently, why should I choose you to do business with? I'll go online. I'll Google your industry. I'll find other companies. Why you? And hopefully, it will be your code of ethics. It'll be your mission statement. It will be your values statement and testimonials from customers and clients who have used your services or products before that you put on that homepage of your website that people are looking at. As a leader, so what's your moral compass? How do you decide? I'll give you a simple example. Have you ever had a night where you tossed and turned and kept waking up, aside from being sick? And you and I probably have, and I would say, isn't it something that someone said or did, or you said or did that day that won't let your spirit rest? That's something going against your moral compass, your moral code, so to speak. And it won't let you rest until it's resolved in some way, shape, or form. You didn't do something right, or you didn't respond appropriately to a different situation, and now you regret it. Those types of things. So what is your moral compass, your moral code? Get in touch with it. And days when everything goes right, you sleep straight through the night. Your spirit is at rest. Number 2, do you have the passion to support your people in the company? Is there a fire in your belly, so to speak, for ethics and values, in addition to compliance as well in your work life? Number 3, can you really make tough decisions? Can you really make them? Based on your own moral compass, moral code, company values, etc. Do you have the tools that you need in order to do that? Number 4, so what's your vision? Your journey, your destination? Promotion? Different division, different company, and based on what? Things to think things through, so to speak. Number 5, is your judgment sound? Haven't all of us made a decision, and as soon as we made it, we thought, oh, gee, maybe I should have thought that through. We've all done that. Be a little bit proactive before you make the decision to take a step back. It won't eradicate the possibility, but it will lessen the odds. And think about it. Number 6, can you manage your emotions? Do you understand how emotions set the tone? How is it we can get 12 to 15 years of training in this country and not get one course on how to control your emotions? And emotions are temporary. Anger, rage, whatever, will go away. But then what? Damage is done. And it may be irreparable. Maybe we ought to be saying things like, if we stay in this room and we keep talking at each other like this, someone's going to get hurt. So how about we take a break? Let's come back in 5 minutes, and let's you and I each come up with an issue that we really need to consider with each other. Take a step back. Don't let emotions dictate. It never works out well. Number 7, are you living the values you profess? Do a values check. Easy to preach, a little bit more difficult to live. And use this technique. I do some work for USAA, the big insurance company, and when I was doing some workshops there, I had a free period, so I went to listen to a general who was the head of the Army Corps of Engineers. And he said, I'm so tired of, and he was in charge of 35,000 employees, getting phone calls and emails, passing decisions up. So he said, now I'm giving you this process to use. It's called Just Do It. He said, if you can answer all 4 of these questions affirmatively, don't bother me. Just do it. So here's this question. Is what you want to do, is it legal? Is it ethical? Is it good for I use this patient, client, customer? You just change the pronoun. Will it be good for the customer, the patient, the client, the vendor, the supplier, etc.? Number 3, is it consistent with our shared values? And if you know at USAA, they live their values. So it's another check. And number 4, are you willing to be held accountable for the decision? So guess which one people really have to think on? Number 4. He said, if you answer all yes, then just do it. Don't bother me. He said, it cut down my phone calls by 72%. It cut down my emails by 57%. That's empowerment. Guidelines. 4 questions. And if you're not willing to be held accountable, then go back to the first 3 and find out why. Great technique. Thought I would throw this in and share it with you. Ethical considerations. Think about this. On what foundations do we base our ethical decisions? Okay, mission statement, value statement, you think it's right, you think it's wrong. What is it? Because people make decisions based on the values they hold dear. Ethical principles are not concerned with how things do operate, but with how they should operate on a values basis. The most difficult decision to make are those in which there's a conflict between 2 or more principles of which you deeply believe in. Let's go back to Rushworth Kidder. Remember, trust versus loyalty, short-term versus long-term, justice versus mercy, individual versus community. Those are difficult decisions to make, but you have to make it. How do you decide? Which value or principle gets the priority? It's important that we determine in advance what our priorities are, realizing a lot will depend on the situation. Once again, not that the situation dictates the values, but how you apply what your priorities are and what you believe in advance. That's where the rubber hits the road. And lastly, 2 factors of making a decision. Is what you're going to do in line with your company, our company's objectives, our goals, our values, etc.? And number two, will this decision result in the right thing being done for the client? If either answer is no, don't do it. But you see where ethics is a tough decision with the payout at the end? This takes time to think about, to put into motion. And I hope this fast-paced, jam-packed, going through, taking sips of water, getting this done has at least given you some ideas, some questions to ask, some things you can use immediately when you go back to work this afternoon, but this morning, wherever you're listening from, to use. I'm very grateful to have been asked to share some of these highlights. And Mark, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you so much, Frank. What a delight. And I learned so much. And I really, really appreciate your insight and everything you shared. So thank you. And of course, you have some amazing content. You have some wonderful leadership materials and speeches. It's just a delight to have you here. And if anyone out there would of course want to have Frank come and visit, he is just a phenomenal speaker, and he will really change the course of your company's leadership. So let us help you. So if in the area of training and process, we have our Global Ethics Solutions has a couple of products that we can of course come alongside you and help you and support what you do. Our IntegraLine event management system, it's really a powerful software tool that allows you employees to report ethical issues and to create a speak up culture. And then, of course, as you as an administrator to track those events and really to create a culture where people feel comfortable to speak up and be proactive. And also, of course, learning. Frank talked about the process, ongoing training. Let us help you there as well. We have our e-learning modules in English and Spanish, and we'd love to help you. So. Thank you so much for joining us this month. So please join us next month as we bring in another expert in the field. Thank you again, Frank. You are a true asset and an inspiration in this industry. So thank you for what you do, and thank you for
sharing. My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
All right, take care. Have a great month, and we will see you in February.